Hello students, I welcome you all to Current Affair Lectures by Azad ICS Academy, and today we will be discussing the current affairs of 2nd Jan 2025. In yesterday's lecture, we had discussed in detail the discussion on how there is a issue with climate change and finances related to the climate change. And in today's class also, there is one of the important article that we have to discuss when it comes to uh, this United Nation organizations. There are a lot of initiatives that this United Nation organization is doing, but the problem is that this initiation or whatever targets that are being set are basically, you can say, not up to the mark. The reason why I say that they're not up to the mark is because most of the targets that are given are not achieved by most of the countries, especially the developed countries. It could be not just the matter, I'm not only discussing about the UNFCCC, but here in today's class, we are also going to discuss another important thing that we need to understand. And that is about the other CBDs that we have or other conventions that we have. Like, for example, we have one more important convention, and that is going to be United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. And that is also not up to the mark, right? So this is something that we have to understand. And that is what we'll be discussing in today's lecture, right? The first thing, or that will be the second topic. Now, for now, we are going to discuss the first topic here. The race for fighters, okay? And the Indian Air Force's dilemma. This is IFA. This is nothing but it is talking about Indian Air Force dilemma. Now, this is a topic of science and technology and under the topic of defense, right? So we have to understand that there is a lot of issues when it comes to defense mechanism. And why this dilemma is there and why this thing is in the news. Before we go into this, I will have to tell you a little bit of background here. Okay. So let us go to the background. Now, what is happening here is why this news is there in the picture is because, see, we need to understand that there is a lot of challenges that is faced by Indian Air Force and why Indian Air Force needs to, basically worry. That is the major thing. Okay. Now, this is because of the modernizing its fighter fleet. Means we all have fighters. Okay. These fighters are basically used in the war and all of that so that we can fight against the enemies that are coming or doing some kind of air strike on us. So we have fighters. Now, what we need to understand here is that in India, the fighters are not that equipped. That is what is the dilemma that Indian Air Force has. Okay, now you need to understand that there is, when you compare, basically Indian Air Force is now comparing itself with China's rapid, strike in or rapid rise in, you can say defense and technology. Especially defense also, and they're doing very good in technology. And when it comes to defense also, they're doing very good. And India's delayed modernization is obviously going to have an impact on us, right? So this is something that is very, very important for us, and we need to understand the reasons why this is happening. Now we need to have that China has, okay, please understand. See, when it comes to these fighters, no, okay, these fighters are of different generations. Okay, now I'll tell you how do you understand which generation is better. Now, first generation, second generation, third generation, we have fourth generation, and then we have 4.5th generation also, like half, and then we have fifth generation. Okay. Now, we need to understand, obviously, first generation will not have that much, what I mean to say, better technology, and the fifth generation will be having the highest, best technology you can see. Now, you need to understand that China has actually, many fifth generation. Basically, there are two fighters. Okay, please understand there are two fighters who are of fifth generation. China has how many fighters which are of fifth generation? Two fighters, and they are of fifth generation. And what are the names of these two fighters? I'll tell you that. One is called J-20, another is called J-35. So these are the two important fighters that China has got now, and making it the only country apart from USA with more than one fifth generation fighters. That means USA is also having more number of fifth generation fighters, and they just don't have one. They have two fifth generation fighters. Okay. Now you need to understand there are only two countries in the world who have got fifth generation fighters. That is not just one. They have more than one fifth generation fighters, and that is USA. And now we have China also. Now this is something that we need to understand. And these jets, they have larger delta wing design. Okay, with engines for a longer range. So these, and they have smaller twin engines with I mean, the technology here is very good, you can see. These jet fighters are having, you need to understand what is the important thing that you need to understand here is that these jet fighters, okay, have a large delta wings, okay. For longer range, you can say why it is used is for long range, means they can travel for a longer range, okay, long range missile missions, etc. You can use this. Similarly, a smaller twin engine is also there. A smaller twin engine. Right? So these are some of the technology that is there in these particular jets. Now, videos of these aircrafts have developed from, okay, it is Chengdu aircraft. From where did this, if you see, there was a video, and the video in which these aircrafts were taking a, flight, you can say, this was happening in Chengdu, Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. Okay. And there's one more, Chengdu Aircraft Corporation. There were two places from where these particular aircrafts have been, deployed. Okay. Surfaced on the social media, but not officially confirmed, has no official confirmation, but they have been, in social media a lot. Okay. This is something that we need to understand. How do, if you have to compare, so I hope now you're understanding that China has got two fighters who are of fifth generation. Apart from USA, China is the only country who has got two different types of fifth generation air fighters. And what are the two air fighters that they have is one is J-20, another is J-35. So now if you compare that with India, okay, the Indian Air Force currently has only 31, please understand. It has got how much? Only 31 fighters, okay, 31 fighter squadrons. That is far below that was sanctioned. Means, we had sanctioned for a lot of them, but we have only got 31 fighters. And it is only, like we had got, I mean, the sanction was for more of them, but we have only got around 31 fighters squadrons right now. India has, please understand. Now let us go to a cleaner slide. India has no, please understand, no is an extreme word, but yes, India has no fifth generation fighters. Please understand that. And this is an issue for us because imagine that if India is not able to, do this fifth generation fighters, it is very difficult to fight with China like countries, right? India has no fifth generation fighters in development and that will be operational within the next decade. So right now we don't have anything. We are planning to have it and that time it will take around a decade. That means around 10 years we need to, come up with these kind of fifth generation fighters. So while Indian Air Force is focusing on indigenous development platforms, okay, but their delivery timelines are delayed. It's not that India does not have technology. We have technology, but the thing is that by the time it gets approved, by the time we have a commitment and by the time we have approval of this, that time the other countries will be again having a next generation fighter. So by the time we have our fifth generation fighter, China will have their sixth generation or seventh generation fighters. So it is very difficult to, fight like this. So this is something that we need to understand that India is not having this kind of, what you mean to say, faster things. And one thing that we need to understand, there are two MiG operations that we have. Okay, MiG-21s, okay, squadrons that we have are still operational due to delay. Means because we are not able to, come up with these squadrons also. Okay, so are still operational due to the delays that we are having in delivery of other, what you mean to say, commissioned technologies. So the problem in India is that we do not have fifth generation fighters and there is a lot of delay as well. So this is something that we need to understand. So like this, we also have to understand that there are deliveries in a lot of engines, right? So first, for example, you need to understand that India planned to acquire 500 plus jet of, we wanted to have this much fighter jets, right? Predominantly indigenously designed and manufactured. Okay, but there are a lot of priorities that we have that is called as LCA MK1A. So we were expecting these kind of different fighters, right? But what is happening here is the delivery is getting delayed because of the supply chain. The delivery is getting delayed because of some other issues like COVID, etc. Now, we also have advanced medium combat fighters, that is fifth generation fighters with the development deadline. That is again going to be, so we have to understand that we will have the fifth generation fighters, but after 10 years, that is going to be in 2035. So imagine in 2025, China has got fifth generation and India will have its fifth generation in 2035. So we are like 10 years running behind is something that we need to focus upon. right? So like this, what is happening here is that there is a lot of issues that are there in Indian Air Force, you can say. The key challenges that we have are because the development engine delivery, there is whatever delays are there or whatever technology that India needs to have, they're all getting delayed. Okay. And there are aging fleets also, means whatever, for example, you can say that this particular, indigenous technology we want to develop in our own country, it was going to take around 10 years. Okay, so these are some of the things, and we are also depending on mostly on foreign engines. Despite the plan of licensing manager, India remains reliant on US and France for critical aero engine parts. So we need to understand that we are relying on USA and we are relying on France basically for important aero engines. This is some of the issues that we are facing when it comes to part. Now, what is the strategy that we need to understand here is that India aims to increase its indigenous production. We need to make sure that we are through HAL, that is Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or through, DRDO, that is Defense Research Development Organization that we have. In all these kind of initiatives, we need to make sure that we are going to do a lot of production. And what we need to understand here is that these kind of delays that are happening should get reduced to some extent. So this is how it can basically, do its betterment. That is something that we need to come up with, right? Apart from this, there are a lot of consequences that are there in the delays. Okay, so even if the planned acquisition, what will happen here is that we will get all our squadrons somewhere in mid 30s or 2030s basically. So still 5 to 6 years is something that we need to get delayed if you want to upgrade our Indian Air Force, and that's not a good sign. So for this, what we need to understand is that we need to focus on our indigenous development, especially when it comes to defense mechanism. Whenever we are trying to do any defense related stuff, we need to make sure that we are developing indigenous technology. That is something that we need to understand. When we have Make in India project, when we have, Atmanirbhar Bharat, we need to make sure that we are depending on our own country and not depending on any other countries. Now, let us see what is mentioned. The same thing is mentioned in your article, and that is what we're going to see. Need to catch up. So please understand, we need to catch up. Chinese ground crew members inspect J-20 Seattle fighter in Chengdu, and other one is also being mentioned. I already told about this. China is already fielded with two fifth generation fighters jet, becoming the only country other than USA. So this is what I've also told you, that have more than one fifth generation fighters. So that means there are only China and USA have got two fifth generation fighters. Okay, or they have more than one fifth generation fighters. In comparison, the Indian Air Force is at 31 fighter squadrons, desperately waiting the new induction and with no fifth generation fighters in the lineup at least for a decade. So you can see here that another 10 years at least we do not have any kind of fifth generation fighter in India. This is something which is very bad news, right? So the full context that we need to understand is the last 2 weeks taking the world by surprise, China unwillingly series of high technology platform establishing its technology supremacy. So here you can see that China is trying to establish its technological supremacy. These include two Seattle fighter jets, the launch on amphibious naval ship, incomprehensive scientific research ships that globally see exploration, and a supersonic civil jet prototype with a new bullet train dubbed on the world's fastest. The time could have been stricken and highlighted that widened technology gap with India. So here you need to understand that there is a gap between Indian Air Force and with the Chinese Air Force, you can say, or the Chinese technology that is coming up with, okay, which is struggling to maintain its fighter squadron strength at modernizing and plagued by delayed deliveries. So whatever I've discussed, that there is a lot of delivery, issues that we have when it comes to Indian defense technology, because we are depending on other countries, especially as I already mentioned you that India is depending on USA and France's technologies or aero parts, you can say. So this is nothing but you can say when they are not able to deliver it on time, we are going to face a lot of issues. So we also have to understand that there is a lot of modernization in the Chinese military, and that is not happening in India. So you can see that the videos emerged on the social media. I already told you that these fighters video have been come more in social media, but we do not have a kind of what you meant to say authorization from the center. But yes, I already told you that Chengdu is one of the center and another is, your Shanghai Aircraft Corporation. From here, these kind of, videos have been floated in the social media, not from the what do you mean to say? You can say it is not properly from the government, but yes, it is happening on the social media. The People Liberation Army Air Force of China has already fielded two fifth generation fighters, and the medium, that is J-35, and heavy J-20, becoming the only country that I have anyways mentioned about this, with two new jets dubbed by many commentators as a sixth generation fighters, which are debatable. China has undoubtedly taken a giant stand in this race. So you can see that China is trying to come up with more such kind of technology, and some of them are also saying that this is sixth generation. Somewhere like almost nearer to the sixth generation is something that people are basically talking about. So this is something that we need to understand. Apart from these, the recent release report to US Congress on the military and security development involved the PCR of 2024 noted that PLFA, that is People's Liberation Army Air Force, and planned Navy aviation together to constitute the largest aviation force in the Indo-Pacific region. Now, see, yesterday itself we were discussing about Quad. That is, we are trying to mention or maintain peace in Indo-Pacific region. But if China is coming up with this kind of thing, so we need to understand that there is a threat on Indo-Pacific region. So these are some of the issues that we have to understand here. So now you need to understand that the People's Liberation Army, Air Force, and planned aviation continue to field greater number of fourth generation aircrafts. Now they more than, you need to understand, 1300 of 1900 total fighters, not including trainers, are probably becoming a major fourth generation force to the next survival years. And the report added that in addition to J-35 and J-20 are being added at a phenomenal rate, the flight testing of the last jet indicates the fairly advanced stage, and that they might have been under a development of something. So here, these kind of reports are telling us that you need to understand they have fourth generation air fighters, around like 1300 air fighters, okay, out of which 1900 air fighters. So they are already, what you mean to say, are operational, or they have these many kind of fighters. Along with J-35 and J-20 being added, you can see that China is doing some kind of rapid development in their technology. Now, when it comes to Indian Air Force, now so far what we discussed is about China. Now we will have to understand about India. What exactly are the issues that we have in Indian modernization plans? So the Indian Air Force at 31 fighter squadrons as against the sanction. So we had around 42 squadrons, but we got only 31 squadrons, desperately waiting for the new induction. Okay. And no fifth generation is in the lineup for at least a decade, and the only outliner among the major countries. So you need to understand that India was supposed to get 42 squadrons, but it has got only 31 squadrons, and we are waiting for the others to come. And apart from that, we do not have any fifth generation fighters, right? And these fifth generation fighters, which we do not have, right? This can happen only in the next 10 years. This is something that you need to understand. Okay. Recent report states that the Pakistan has approved the procurement. So here you can see that the Pakistan is getting 40 J-35s from China. See, Pakistan, of course, is not a good neighbor of India, and China is also not that a good neighbor of India. So they are going to make friendship. China is going to give around 40 J-35s, which is a fifth generation fighter, to Pakistan. And that is again a threat to us. Okay. It is uncanny coincidences. Very recently, the Defense Ministry has appointed a committee led by the Defense Strategy to look into the overall capacity development of Indian Air Force. India has been ambitious planning lined up with acquisition over 500 fighters jet. A bulk of them have indigenously designed and manufactured. Majority of them for, Indian Air Force itself. However, these are at various stages and development and manufacturing, and their timely delivery are critical. So you need to understand that we are trying to have 500 fighter jets in bulk. Some of them are in developmental stages, and most of them are manufactured basically for Indian Air Force only. But the problem is that we are not expecting them to come in time. The delivery is not going to happen in time. Of these, the LCA variants will constitute bulk. Okay, these are 83 LCA Mk1As on order, but I mean, this is a name of that particular engine or a fighter, you can say. Okay, on order, but their deliveries have been delayed, as if for F404 engines by General Electrical. So by General Electrical, we were supposed to get this, but they are now getting delayed because of the engine. And what is the name of the engine? That is for F0F has been delayed. A deal of 97 additional Mk1As were also under discussion. They are only under discussion, no any report on this as well. Now, the LCA Mk2 fifth generation fighters, the Advanced Medium Combat Air Force. So this and the twin engine deck based fighters for the Navy all have a very high ambition development timelines, but the complexity and the track record, it has been shown that they are ready and available for induction. So they are, anyways, we are not that we don't have it. but we are ready and we are available for induction, but that is anyways going to take a little bit more time again. Now, the Defense Research and Development Organization is working indigenous development on LAC Mk2 aircrafts and AMCA. That is, it is trying to work on advanced medium combat aircraft, that is the 5th generation aircraft itself. The Defense Ministry informed the Parliament Standing Committee on the Defense as per the report tabled under this month. The delivery of this particular LAC Mk2 and AMCA are expected to commence only in the next decade. So see, whatever development that is happening, that will only happen in the next decade. Not right now. Next decade means another 10 years. So whatever we are trying to do is not going to happen right now. It's going to happen next 10 years. So here you can see only to the next decade, only once the development cycle is successfully completed. So this is some of the issues that we have in India. So what this particular writer who is there is trying to tell us is that we need to understand that China is kind of trying to move forward, and in India, we are facing a lot of issues. And that's what he's trying to give a report also here. You can see that it is most noted that the current 31 squadrons, the phase out of 2 MiG-21 squadrons have been extended due to the delay in deliveries. You can see that there is a lot of delay in deliveries, and this entire paragraph, they are talking about the same thing. That we were supposed to get all these squadrons, but we are not getting all these squadrons because of numerous reasons. What are the numerous reasons that are mentioned here is you can see the deliveries of LAC Mk1, the instance in it is going to be coming into our country by 27, 28, like next 3 or 4 years. So apart from that, we have other things also. So you can see that whatever we are doing, we may get it by 2040. Most of these are types that will be phased out. Some of the in the 30s itself. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. You need to understand whatever. Let us assume that by 2030 or by 2035, we have 5th generation aircraft. And by that time, China will have 7th generation aircrafts. Better than us. So you need to understand that there's a race that China is doing. So this is something that we need to understand. So here you can also talk about the other procurements that is mentioned here. As a report by The Hindu recently, the backdrop of the controversies in the procurement of 36 Rafale fighter jets, the government is looking into the procurement model, the transport and non-controversial of other things like multi-role fighter aircraft. So this is something that we need to understand. Underscoring the urgency, this particular chief, that is Indian Air Force Chief Marshal P.A. Singh, said that in October, that this particular multi-role fighter aircraft was needed as for yesterday. So not today. We do not want it now. We wanted it like yesterday. The large number of capable LCA Mk2 are under development and are supposed to do the first flight in October with December 2027 to the end of research and development. So you need to understand that they will be all working by December 2027. And they were something that was needed yesterday. So he is kind of telling us that whatever technology that we are developing right now, which will be available for the future, are something that were required yesterday. Okay. So in October 2022, another chief of your Indian Air Force, that is AMC, VR Chadurai, considered that even with the different types of this thing that will be there, that we will be still having 35 to 36 squadrons by the middle of next decade. So you need to understand that whatever new things are coming also are not going to come right now, and they're going to come in the middle of next year or next decade, not even next year, next decade. This is something which is very difficult for us. So as soon as the engine problem is sorted, we have a plan to make. There are a lot of engine problems that we are having. And once these engine problems are sorted, you can see that COVID-19 is also one of the reasons why there was a delay by General Electrical, right? So these are some of the issues that we have. As soon as the engine problem is sorted, we have planned to take around 24 LACs every year and 30 every year. And the representative stated that one of the argument between the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited and the General Electric for the licensing manufacturing of 4141 engines in the India for ministry representative expressed confidence that it should gain sign in the next 3 to 4 months. So these are all discussions that are happening. But for now, the concept that we need to understand, I'm not expecting you to remember all of these names, etc. and all of that. Right now, what is the thing that we need to understand here is that we need to develop a lot of technology when it comes to our defense mechanism, right? So we need to have indigenous development. And we also need to understand that we are having a lot of aero engine trouble. And we need to understand that we are essentially depending on USA and France. So USA are part of fighter fleet and France for the remainder of the fighter fleet, and almost all the helicopter segments for more indigenous platform come in. So in just, we need to understand that China unveils a series of high technology platform establishing the technological supremacy. So China is trying to show its technological supremacy. It includes 2 fighter jets, and we have also discussed the name of it, and that is what? J-20 and J-35. And we need to understand around 40 J-25s will also be given to Pakistan. This is something that we need to understand. India has an ambition to plan lineup acquisition over 500 fighter jets. A bulk of them are indigenously designed, but this is not going to happen now. But their manufacturing is something that we need to worry about. It is going to be delayed. It's not going to happen very soon. There will be a lot of delay. An aerospace engine is likely to remain a single major dependent, and the country allies for very high, allies to heal for a longer time. So we need to understand that we are depending on a lot of other countries for aero engines. Right? So this is something like this. And now when you are trying to give a conclusion for this kind of questions, when you get such kind of questions, if you are trying to give a conclusion, you need to mention that, yes, look, India is having some of the important jet fighters, but we need to also work more on indigenous technology, right? So this is something that we need to understand. We just cannot have only criticism in our conclusion. We need to make sure what are the way forward, what are the suggestions. The way forward and the suggestion is that India needs to work on, delays in the delivery, that is delay in the technology. So whatever they're saying that will happen in the next 10 years, that should happen in maybe 1 or 2 years or something like that. The time that is there should be less. Okay. So delays in the technology should be reduced. That is one of the things that India needs to work on. And apart from this, India also needs to work on indigenous technologies. That is, instead of depending on other countries for the parts, it needs to work on indigenous, or it needs to do more research and what you mean is the research, and depend on technology that is developed in India, and not depend on other countries like, aero engine troubles or something like that. Yeah, this is some of the way forward that you can give to students. Apart from this, now this is something that you need to understand here. Okay, what is that? Is 4 United Nations environmental summits fell short in 2024. So in 2024, we had somewhere around 4 important environmental summits. What are the 4 important environmental summits? I'll tell you. One is UNFCCC's COP29 that happened at Baku. I think all of you are aware of this. Similarly, you had UNCBD, you had UNCCD, Conservation on Combating Desertification. This is desertification, this is biological diversity. Now, these also had their conference of parties, and all the three basically failed. And another important new thing that has come up today, I'll discuss about this. Now, see, all the three came up from Rio Earth Summit itself. If you remember, in yesterday's class, we had discussed more in detail about UNFCCC. I'm not going to discuss again the same thing because it's already discussed as a static part. Okay, UNFCCC static part I've discussed in the yesterday's class. Today, I will also give you some important basic information regarding the UNCBD and UNCCD, right? But all the three came out of Rio Earth Summit itself. Okay, that we were seeing that there were a lot of issues that was happening, and this came out of from here. Now, all the three basically failed. And there's a fourth one that is basically for the plastic thing. Okay, now this also is kind of failed. Now we'll see why all this failure and what is this particular entire news talking about. Okay, the first thing, an activist at a people plenary of COP29 Nations Climate Change Conference in Baku, Azerbaijan in November recurs. 4 United Nations environmental summit fell short in 2024. Basically, what happened, we'll see that. At the heart of the breakdown lies in the divergence of the nation's priority development nations. Grappling in the development challenge, economic constraints and affecting climate change have repeatedly demanded more technology and support from the developed countries. So as I already discussed in yesterday's class also, that the developed countries need to give money to the developing countries, and that is not happening. So there's a lot of financial issues. So you can see repeatedly demand for technology and financial support from whom? From the developing countries. Who are depending or who are doing it? Is developing nations. The United Nations efforts to address critical environmental challenges hit multiple roadblocks in this year. The 4 key summits. Now, what are the 4 important key summits that have happened? That is in Colombo. So in Colombia, it was biodiversity. Azerbaijan on climate. Saudi Arabia, it was on the land degradation. That is this thing, right? CCD. And in South Korea on plastics, fail to deliver the meaningful outcomes. Means they did the meeting, okay, but this meeting was kind of not able to fulfill their meanings. I mean, whatever they wanted to do, they were not able to do that. So what is the point in even having such kind of meetings is something that we need to understand. Now, these meetings brought together governments, researchers, policymakers, industries, and civil society organizations to ensure their goals align, building equitable accountability, and mobilizing adequate finances for actions. But all 4 summits achieved no or partial success. You can say almost no success or partial success on the issue that they had to address. So they came here, a lot of industrialists, conference of parties will consist of scientists, will consist of government people, researchers, policymakers, everyone. But all of them came and many countries came in, but they were not able to get any kind of success or a kind of a partial success, you can say. In fact, this is the fourth time UN discussions designed to push countries to significant progress in addressing biodiversity loss, climate change, plastic pollution. So these are the things that are happening in these four summits. Okay, so UNFCCC is talking about the climate change. Here it is talking about biological diversity. Here it is talking about land degradation, and here it is talking about plastic pollution. This happened. This is supposed to happen in South Korea. See, usually they keep asking you such kind of things, like they may give you correctly paired once. So UNFCCC happened in Baku, and this is more a news. So remember, UNFCCC happened in Baku, the Conference of Parties. UN CBD basically happened in Colombia, and land degradation happened in Saudi Arabia. And the next thing that we have here is happened in your South Korea. So this significant in fact, okay, yeah, this is a significant setback for the global efforts to address biodiversity loss, climate change, potential leading and delayed actions on critical issues such as climate financing, drought mitigation, and plastic pollution, with most vulnerable countries potentially suffering from their greatest impact. So you can see that most of the countries are now suffering because of all these issues. A partial or full failure of these talks raise pressing concerns about the global community's ability to combat diversity, climate change, and other urgent environmental crises. Understanding the reason behind these setbacks are their implications for global cooperation is essential for charting more effective path forward. So what we need to understand here is that over a period of time, whatever has happened is of not a good thing, because what is happening here is now all these things that we are seeing is kind of, what you mean to say, a setback that you can see. Okay, because what is happening here is that if the global countries, when they come together, if they're not able to find out kind of uh, solution to all these problems, then what is the use of having such kind of things every year, right? So divergent, we'll see what is the issues. One of the important thing is divergent national interests. At the heart of the talks breakdown lies at the start and the developing divergence in the nation's priority. That is, you can see that there are world is divided into two types, or basically you can see three, basically. One is the developed countries, okay? And another is that we have is developing countries. So that's what they are saying here, is that there is a divergent nation in the interest. So the interest of these nations are different and the interest of these nations are different. So that is why it is saying that there is a divergent national interest. The interest that we have here is in the nationals is not same. There is a lot of divergence. Developing nations grappling with developmental challenges, okay, economic constraints, and the impact of the climate change have repeatedly demanded more technology transfer and financial support from the developed countries. So what are developing countries basically worrying about? Developing countries are worrying about the challenges that they have, such as, technology transfer, or they need a lot of technological support, they need a lot of financial support. Basically, this is what they are expecting from them. But the developed nations are reluctant and reluctant to commit additional resources, citing domestic political pressure. So they also have what? Domestical, pressures or political pressures, you can say, and economical challenges of their own. So they also have economical challenges. No, it's not that the developed countries are not having any kind of economical challenge. They also have their economical challenges of their own. Now they want to fight. See, developed countries are like, they are not going to think about other countries now. They are only going to think about themselves. So this is the interest. Now look, developing countries are saying that we want more money, we want more technological support. But developed countries are like, why are we supposed to support? Now imagine a simple example that a lot of people support from USA. Okay, especially during the COVID. And USA people think that China is a person, or China is a country who has done, or who is majorly reason for this particular COVID. I'm just giving you an example. This is what is the mentality. Now, why do you think that USA will help China to, do better in their environmental facility or in their technology? Obviously, no, right? Because China is a developing country right now. So, for example, Colombia talks on biodiversity conservation flattened the countries failed to agree upon financial mechanism to support sustainable land use practices. So here you need to understand that in Colombia, there was a conversion that was happening, conversation that was happening for conservation of biodiversity. That is when they wanted financial support, and people did not do financial support. Financing conservation at a scale came to gridlock with the countries lagging in ambition. Being now nowhere close to deliver around 700 billion per year required in Azerbaijan, developing countries demanded. So see, we are only getting $700 billion per year, but developing countries are demanding around $1.3 trillion every year from the developed nations. And this talks ended with later loosely agreeing to raise the amount from wide range of sources. So here you can say that this kind of, what you meant to say, conflict that's happening, and no, there is no kind of any proper, what do you mean to say, thing that is coming out, or we are not coming up with a conclusion. Also in Azerbaijan, the countries were divided to overpledge the transition away from the fossil fuels, and the decision during the last United Nations Climate Summit, the plastic pollution talks in South Korea also brought a force or a force significant divide among the participating nations. So you can see that there's a lot of divide that is being created between the developed countries and the developing countries, right? So this is something that we need to understand, that there is no common goal, you can say, there is no common thing that they're coming up with, right? The meeting concluded without reaching any agreement, primarily because the countries had to rely on economical depend on going demands for plastic opposed. See, I'll tell you something. What happens in the plastic? Now, I will tell you an example. I went to a more, grocery store one day, and I asked for a plastic. And there we were getting these green plastics, the plastics which can get biodegradable, and they can be easily thrown away. I mean, what you meant to say? These plastics, they were green plastics, you can say. They can be degraded by the environment, biodegradable plastics these were. And these plastics were costing me somewhere around 100 rupees or something like that for 10 plastics or something like that. Not even much of the plastics were there. So this was a very big shock. Like, the normal polythene bags that you're getting, which are one-time plastic, are, for 10 rupees, you may get around 10, 50 bags. They'll give you so much of money. I mean, so much of plastic. But if you want to, come up with something like green plastics or something, you need to do in a lot of research. You need to do in a lot of financial investment. Now, why do you think the developing countries who are able to, produce more plastic with less money now will do reverse of it? Why would they do it, right? Because obviously they are going to face in a lot of issues. Like, if instead of pushing a proper usage and recycling of plastic waste, so what we are trying to do here is we need to understand that we are, like, for example, I am a developing country like India. Why would I have an economic losses, right? Because if I'm able to produce less plastic with more amount, that is kind of green plastics, do you think I will do that? Of course not, because I want to be in a profitable business. I don't want to be in a loss-making business. And you're not giving us financial support also, and you're asking us not to use plastic. This is something that is not expected the developing countries or developed countries to basically do. Or they cannot push these kind of things on the developing countries. Now, there are a lot of crises. Several talks stumbled upon disagreement over frameworks needed and monitored enforce environmental goals. In Azerbaijan, discussion on implementing the global stocktake under the Paris Agreement saw a division over accountability mechanism. And you can see that particularly the high emission nations. So high emission nations are those nations which are developed nations, and they were not basically agreeing to the terms and conditions that, Azerbaijan talks were happening. Obviously, they are not going to agree because they'll have to pay money, right? So this is something that happened. In Saudi Arabia, industrialized nation clashed with African countries over the establishment of legally binding DRUT protocol. While the former wanted the board operational framework, the African nations demanded a concrete plan with economic commitments. Here also you can see that the industrial nations and African countries, they had a kind of a clash that happened here, and they did not agree upon anything. Similarly, global crises include COVID-19 pandemic, other economic instabilities, geopolitical conflicts. All these issues are anyways there in our country, I mean in the world. For many countries, particularly for those who are having limited institutions and financial capacities, the challenge to balance between the economic recovery efforts with the long-term sustainability goals have weakened with negotiating positions. These have further reduced the willingness to ability and commit to ambitious environmental targets. So you can see that there is a lot of countries, who are facing a lot of issues, especially if you go to least developed countries, they do not have any kind of money or things or financial support that they would get from any kind of, what you meant to say, organizations. It is very difficult for them to balance between the economical stability and, have a sustainable goal. This is something which is not going to happen. Now, developing countries in particular face heightened difficulties as they navigate inflation, now debt burdens, and overall development challenges along the climate vulnerabilities, leading to a call of greater financial and technological support from the wealthier nations. So we are trying to get a lot of support from the other wealthier nations, and that is something that the developing countries are basically looking forward. Okay, so these are some of the issues. Now I wanted to basically talk about, apart from this, there is a lot of growing divide and consciousness as well. So we'll see what are those. Delayed actions, of course, and the setbacks in the global negotiation. So you can see that there's a lot of setback that is happening in the global negotiation. The delayed actions, the inability and the failure to agree upon the frameworks and commit the concrete action by nation, postpone critical measures. Okay. And apart from that, the fragmented efforts as multilateral process flattered, the growth risk of countries turning to unilateral regional actions. While these initiatives are well mannered and can make progress, okay, they would lack the global coherence necessary to address environmental issues comprehensively and equitably, and could trigger new problems because of lack of coordination among the nations. So there are a lot of, you can see that there's a lack of coordination among the nations, and because of this, the efforts are not collective and they are fragmented. So erosion of trust. Obviously, repeated failures of these negotiations, you will stop trusting these United Nation organizations or United Nation, functions or whatever they are trying to do. You will not have this trust. Pressures on future summits. So the failure of multiple global negotiation on the further environmental further forces upcoming meetings to deliver meaningful outcomes. But anyways, it's of no use because most of these are not going to happen. Right now, we have, I think, see, all of us know about UNCBD, right? UNCBD. Right now, we have, this is United Nations Conservation on Biological Diversity, with 196 countries being participation on this. And this is basically, trying to conserve the biological diversity and use sustainable sustainable use of biological diversity, fair and equitable sharing. This is some of the important what it is objectives of this particular United Nations Conservation on Biodiversity. Apart from this, what you need to understand is there are two important protocols under this. Okay, when you're doing static part, you will do more in detail. One is called as Cartagena Protocol, and another is called as Nagoya Protocol. Now, Cartagena Protocol was basically, regulate the transboundary movements of living modified organisms. So this is basically if you want to, do transboundary movement of these kind of living modified organisms, you need to have regulation. And who is going to do regulation? That is be done under Cartagena Protocol. Apart from this, this was established around in 2000, and this was established somewhere around in 2010. Okay, establishes legally binding framework for accessing genetical resources. See, I'll tell you why genetical resources are so important for us. Now, if you're doing some kind of genetical change in a particular plant, assume, okay, and what happens here is if you're trying to bring it to the local part there, then what will happen is because of the change in the genetics, there would be some issue in the nature now. So we need to understand what changes have you done in this particular, gene, and we need to have the the resource should be shared with us so that we can basically check whether this particular genetical resources is good for us or bad for us. So fair and equitable sharing of these genetical resources that we have. Okay, so that it can be, we can get the benefits also of it, and we are also aware of what are the issues. Okay, this is about UNCBD. And then next we have UNCCD. Okay, that is related to combat, what you mean to say, your desertification. And I already told you that all the three, that is UNFCCC, I am not discussing about UNFCCC because we have discussed this in yesterday's class. UNFCCC, UNCBD, and UNCCD. All the three came from Rio Earth Summit, right? Now here, this is to protect and restore the land, have a safer and sustainable future, mitigate impacts of land degradation. All these things are happening in this particular CBD, okay? So these are some of the important things. Now, next thing that we need to remember here is, this is something which is very important for us to remember in this particular article. And that is, we have, which is called as, this is basically related to plastic pollution. So in March 2022, which is very recent, okay, there was a 5th session on United Nations Environmental Assembly. It is Assembly, okay, United Nations Environmental Assembly, okay, and it was a historic revolution, and it adopted something which is called as international legal legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. So we want to reduce the plastic pollution, and for the reduction of the plastic pollution, what we have done is we have something which is called as international legally binding instrument. Now, this includes marine environment also. Very, very important. It includes marine environment as well. Now, what we need to understand here is this resolution requires, here it was, it requested the executive director of the United Nations Environment Program to convince this intergovernmental negotiation committee and develop this instrument. So this was done by, UN, United Nations Environment Program. Okay. And this is something that we need to understand. The objective of this particular body is to regulate the global plastic treaties. That is to set a global framework on ground of accountability, responsibility, and finance, marketing. All the things related to plastic will be done by this particular thing. Now, this particular INC, that is, they have come up with this particular instrument. And what is this going to do here is that is it is intergovernmental negotiating committee. This is something that came out. Okay. So what happens here is now we have to control the plastic, full life cycle of the plastic, or how the plastic is produced, what is the design, disposal. Now, who is going to do all this? Now, that will be done by your intergovernmental negotiating committee. So, what you need to understand here is these two, okay? That United Nations Environmental Assembly, International Legally Binding Instrument, both of them together have come up with something new called as Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. It is also called as INC. It is not Indian National Congress. It is International Negotiating Committee to develop an instrument which is based on how do you address the life cycle of the plastic, okay? And we are also going to see the design, the disposal, etc. Now, what is this going to do here is, now this was established and will meet 5 times to develop a specific content on how these plastics will, work, etc. So what is going to happen here is, this is something that we need to understand, that we have a new thing that is also there, which is not a part of, what you mean to say, these 3 sisters that came out of Rio Earth Summit. Apart from that, we have a 4th one, that is Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. Now, these are going to talk about how do we deal with plastics. Now, I am discussing this because we have this same discussion that happened even in South Korea this year. And this was again not a kind of, what you mean to say, a good sign, because they did not come up with a good, what you mean to say, conclusion here as well. Okay. The first session took place in and Uruguay, and which was somewhere into 2020. And the following sessions happened in, Paris. And then the third session happened in Kenya. And the 4th session also happened. Right now, we are also having the 5th session, that was scheduled from 25th December to 1st of December, 2024. That happened in Republic of Korea. And this, now the process is kind of, ended, you can say. And here in this 5th session also, you can see that no much result has been come out. So this is something that we need to understand. And so what do you conclude from this particular article is that, we have to understand that all these things that we are trying to do is kind of not good enough, because we are not able to come up with a proper outcome here. So whatever meaningful outcome is there, that is basically not happening, is something that is being mentioning in this particular article. And we have seen that how these all are kind of a failure, right? Even FCC is a kind of a failure. CBD is a kind of a failure. The CCD also was not able, the parties were not able to agree much. So you can say that all of them had a partial or no success, you can say, because there was no much, what you mean to say, things that they were supposed to do that did not happen. The developing countries did not get that financial support and the technical support from the developed countries. Now, what is the way forward here? See, again, the way forward, I mentioned similar in yesterday's session. I'm going to mention the similar kind of way forward here also. Each and every country, instead of completely depending on developed countries, all the developing countries should have their own nationally determined contributions, okay, for each of the sectors, and they should do it for themselves. See, nobody is going to help us at the end of the day, because these developed countries are not going to help us. So we need to make sure that we are having a sustainable and a stable growth, and try to, I know we need financial assistance, but if we are trying to have our own technology, that it will be more easy for us. Similar to what happened in the Air Force pressure as well. If India is trying to have its own indigenous technology, it is going to be always helpful. Similarly, in all these matters also, we should have our own indigenous or our own plans, goals, etc., so that we can meet or try to, reduce our emissions, try to conserve our biological diversity, try to conserve our land sources, and also focus on how do we reduce the plastic pollution in our country, right? So this is something that we need to understand. So these are the two important articles that we have discussed today, right? In the next, that is in tomorrow's session, we'll discuss more important articles. I'll see you till then. If you have any comments, any suggestions, try to put it in the comment section below. Thank you so much.